What if I told you that the worst Thanksgiving dinner of my life became the fuel for my biggest success? Today, I'm sharing the story of how my father's crushing words at our family table pushed me to build a company that would eventually appear on national television. If you've ever felt like giving up on your dreams because someone didn't believe in you, this story is for you. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon because this journey will remind you that sometimes our biggest critics become our greatest motivators. Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. November 2018. The smell of roasted turkey filled my childhood home in the suburbs of Chicago, but I could barely stomach the thought of food. I was 28 years old, sitting at the same mahogany dining table where I'd shared countless Thanksgiving meals, but this year felt different. The familiar sounds of my family gathering, my mom bustling in the kitchen, my younger sister Sarah setting the table, my nephew playing with his toy trucks, seemed muted compared to the weight of the conversation I knew was coming. I had been dreading this moment for weeks. My startup FreshFlow, a meal kit delivery service focused on locally sourced ingredients, was barely keeping its head above water. We'd launched 8 months earlier with high hopes and a small investment from my savings, but the competition was fierce, and our customer acquisition costs were through the roof. I was hemorrhaging money, working 16-hour days from my cramped studio apartment, and watching my bank account dwindle to nothing. So, Marcus, my father's voice cut through the ambient chatter as he carved the turkey with surgical precision. When are you going to stop playing businessman and get a real job? The room fell silent. My mother's face flushed as she emerged from the kitchen carrying the cranberry sauce, shooting my father a warning look that he completely ignored. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, suddenly very interested in her. Mashed potatoes, Dad? It's not playing. FreshFlow is a real business. We have paying customers. We're solving a real problem in the market. You're 28 years old, living in that shoebox apartment, barely making rent, he interrupted, his voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment that had haunted my childhood. Your college friends are buying houses, starting families, building real careers, and you're what? Delivering vegetables. My chest tightened. We're not just delivering vegetables. We're connecting local farmers with urban consumers, reducing food waste, supporting sustainable agriculture. Marcus? His voice was firm, final. You'll never make it. This startup nonsense is a fantasy. You're smart, you have an MBA from Northwestern, you could have a 6-figure job at any consulting firm in the city. Instead, you're chasing some pipe dream that's going nowhere. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my mother's hand reach across the table to touch mine, but I pulled away. The room felt suffocating, the walls of my childhood home suddenly seeming to close in on me. You don't understand the business, Dad. The meal kit delivery industry is projected to reach $20 billion by 2025. We're positioned perfectly to capture market share in the Midwest. Statistics and projections? He scoffed, taking a sip of wine. I've been in business for 35 years. Son, I've seen 100 young entrepreneurs convinced they're going to change the world. They all end up working for someone else eventually. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Outside on the back porch, the November wind cut through my sweater as I tried to steady my breathing. The suburban street was quiet except for the distant sounds of other families celebrating inside their warm, well-lit homes. I pulled out my phone and stared at the FreshFlow app icon, remembering the excitement I'd felt the day we launched it. Sarah joined me a few minutes later, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. He doesn't mean it. You know, he's just scared. Scared. Of what? That you'll fail and get hurt? That you'll struggle like he did when he started his accounting firm? She sat down beside me on the porch swing. He's also scared that you'll succeed and prove that his way isn't the only way. I stared out at the empty street, processing her words. Well, the way things are going, he might be right about the failure part. Tell me what's really happening with the business. For the next hour, I laid out everything. Our customer acquisition costs were 40% higher than projected. Our supplier relationships were unstable, and we were burning through cash faster than we could raise it. 3 of our main competitors had massive venture capital backing, and we were competing on marketing spend with bootstrapped resources. But you still believe in it? Sarah asked. I thought about our customers, busy parents who were finally able to cook healthy meals for their families, young professionals who were learning to cook for the first time, elderly customers who had regained their independence in the kitchen thanks to our simplified meal kits. I thought about the local farms we were supporting, the jobs we'd created, the vision of a more sustainable food system. Yeah, I said finally. I do. Then don't let his fear become your reality. Chapter 2. The Pivot. Chicago, December 2018. August 2019, the weeks following Thanksgiving were the darkest of my entrepreneurial journey. My father's words echoed in my head every morning as I sat in my tiny apartment, surrounded by business plans, financial projections, and empty coffee cups. But instead of crushing me, they began to fuel something else, a burning determination to prove him wrong. I threw myself into understanding why FreshFlow was struggling. I spent December conducting customer interviews, analyzing our data, and studying our successful competitors. What I discovered changed everything. Our customers didn't just want convenience, they wanted to feel connected to their food sources. They valued the stories behind their ingredients, the faces of the farmers, the journey from soil to plate, but our packaging and presentation felt generic, corporate, almost sterile compared to the warm, personal experience our customers craved. We need to completely reimagine our brand, I told my co-founder and best friend since college, Jake Martinez, during one of our late-night strategy sessions in January. We're not just a meal kit company, we're storytellers. Jake looked up from his laptop, exhaustion evident in his eyes. Marcus, we're barely keeping the lights on. We can't afford a complete rebrand. We can't afford not to, I insisted. Look at these customer interviews. Listen to how they talk about wanting to know their farmers, wanting to feel connected to their food. We're missing the entire emotional component of our value proposition. Over the next 3 months, we completely overhauled FreshFlow. We changed our name to Farm Table Stories and redesigned everything from our packaging to our mobile app. Each meal kit would include not just ingredients and recipes, but also stories about the farms where the food was grown, profiles of the farmers, and even QR codes that customers could scan to see videos of their food being harvested. The transformation was expensive and exhausting. I maxed out my credit cards, sold my car, and moved to an even smaller apartment to cut costs. Jake and I worked out of a shared workspace in Wicker Park, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. Some nights I fell asleep at my desk, waking up with keyboard marks on my face. My mother called weekly, always asking how I was doing, never mentioning my father's Thanksgiving comments. My sister Sarah became my unofficial cheerleader, sharing our social media posts and even convincing some of her friends to try our service. But from my father, there was only silence. The breakthrough came in June. A food blogger with 50,000 followers discovered Farm Table Stories and wrote a review that went viral. She loved everything about our approach, the storytelling, the connection to local farms, the quality of the ingredients. Her post was shared thousands of times, and suddenly our website was getting more traffic than it had ever seen. Orders started pouring in. We went from struggling to fulfill 200 orders per week to scrambling to handle 1,500. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. Jake and I were working 20-hour days, coordinating with farmers, managing logistics, handling customer service, and barely keeping up with demand. By August, we had grown our customer base by 400% and achieved our first profitable month. We were featured in Chicago Magazine as one of the city's startups to watch, and investors who had previously ignored our emails were suddenly returning our calls. The feeling of proving my father wrong was intoxicating, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more than just success. I wanted validation on a scale that he couldn't dismiss or minimize. Chapter 3. The Call. Chicago, October 2019. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing our Q3 financial reports. Jake was at our new office space in River North. We'd finally outgrown the shared workspace, meeting with a potential investor who was interested in leading our Series A round. Subject: Farm Table Stories. TV opportunity from Jennifer Walsh, producer, Good Morning America. Marcus, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I'm a producer for Good Morning America's lifestyle segment. We're putting together a feature story about innovative food startups that are changing how Americans think about cooking and eating at home. Farm Table Stories came to our attention through a story that ran in Food and Wine magazine last month. We're fascinated by your approach to storytelling and local sourcing, and we'd love to feature your company in an upcoming segment. Would you be available for a call this week to discuss the opportunity? Best regards, Jennifer Walsh. I read the email 3 times before the words fully sank in. Good Morning America. National television. Millions of viewers. My hands were shaking as I called Jake. Dude, you need to sit down. I'm in the middle of a pitch meeting. This better be Good Morning America wants to feature us. Silence then. I'm sorry. What? I read him the email, and I could hear him excusing himself from his meeting. 20 minutes later, he was bursting through our office door. Investor meeting apparently forgotten. This is it, he said, pacing back and forth. This is the break we needed. The call with Jennifer Walsh exceeded our wildest expectations. They wanted to do a full segment, not just a brief mention, but a complete story about Farm Table Stories, including interviews with me, footage of our partner farms, and demonstrations of our meal kits. The segment would air during their Thanksgiving week programming, reaching an estimated 4.2 million viewers. We love stories about entrepreneurs who are building something meaningful, Jennifer explained during our video call. Your company represents everything that's exciting about the food industry right now: innovation, sustainability, community connection, and authentic storytelling. The next month was a whirlwind of preparation. The Good Morning America team visited our offices, interviewed our partner farmers, and spent hours filming content for the segment. They wanted to capture the authentic story of Farm Table Stories, how 2 friends from Chicago had built a business that was reconnecting people with their food sources. During one of the interview sessions, Jennifer asked me about my motivation for starting the company. I think it comes from believing that food is more than just fuel, I said, trying to articulate something I'd never fully expressed before. It's connection, it's story, it's community. When someone opens one of our meal kits and sees the photo of the farmer who grew their vegetables, reads about the family farm where their meat was raised, they're not just cooking dinner, they're participating in a food system that values people and sustainability over pure efficiency. And what drives you personally? What keeps you working those long hours? I thought about my father's words from the previous Thanksgiving, about Sarah's support, about the customers who had become evangelists for our mission. I guess I've always believed that if you're going to do something, you should do it in a way that makes the world a little bit better. And I wanted to prove that you can build a successful business while staying true to your values. The segment was scheduled to air on Thursday, November 28th, Thanksgiving Day. The irony wasn't lost on me. Exactly 1 year after my father had told me I'd never make it, Farm Table Stories would be featured on national television during the most food-focused day of the year. Chapter 4. The Moment, Chicago. November 28, 2019. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, my stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and terror. The Good Morning America segment was scheduled to air at 8:15 a.m., and I had been too nervous to sleep properly for the past 3 days. Jake and I had decided to watch the segment together at the office, along with our small but growing team of 12 employees. We'd set up a viewing party with coffee, donuts, and a champagne bottle ready for afterward. But first, I had to endure another Thanksgiving dinner with my family. The dynamic at my parents' house was completely different from the previous year. The financial stress that had been weighing on me was gone. Farm Table Stories was now profitable, growing rapidly, and about to close a $2.3 million Series A funding round. I'd moved to a spacious apartment in Lincoln Park, bought a car, and was finally earning a salary that my father would consider respectable. But more importantly, the crushing self-doubt was gone. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was building something meaningful. Nervous about the TV segment? My mother asked as I helped her prepare the cranberry sauce. Terrified, I admitted. But excited? My father was quieter than usual during the morning preparations. Sarah told me later that he'd been asking her questions about the business for weeks, how it worked, how many customers we had, what the growth trajectory looked like. He'd even visited our website, though he'd never mentioned it to me directly. At 8:10 a.m., our entire family gathered around the television in the living room. My nephew, now 4 years old, was more interested in his toy train than the television, but everyone else was focused intently on the screen. Coming up next, announced the Good Morning America host, we're talking to the founders of a Chicago-based startup that's revolutionizing how families think about cooking at home. Farm Table Stories is connecting urban consumers with local farmers through innovative meal kits that tell the story behind every ingredient. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Then it happened. The Farm Table Stories logo appeared on the screen, our green and gold design with the tagline, "Every meal tells a story," broadcast into millions of homes across America. For a moment, everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life. The segment was everything we had hoped for, and more. Jennifer Walsh had crafted a beautiful story about innovation in the food industry, featuring gorgeous footage of our partner farms, testimonials from happy customers, and interviews with Jake and me discussing our vision for a more connected food system. What started as a simple idea to help busy families cook healthier meals has evolved into something much bigger. Jennifer's voiceover explained as the camera showed customers unboxing our meal kits. Farm Table Stories isn't just delivering ingredients, they're delivering stories, connections, and a vision of a more sustainable food future. The segment featured several of our customers talking about how Farm Table Stories had changed their relationship with cooking and eating. A young mother in Evanston explained how our meal kits had helped her teach her children about where food comes from. A busy professional in downtown Chicago described how our stories had inspired him to visit a local farmer's market for the first time. When my interview footage appeared on screen, I barely recognized myself. The confident, articulate entrepreneur, speaking passionately about sustainable food systems, seemed like a completely different person from the struggling, self-doubting startup founder who had sat at this same table exactly 1 year earlier. "We believe that every meal should tell a story," I heard myself saying on national television. When you know the farmer who grew your vegetables, when you understand the care that went into raising your meat, when you can see the family behind your food, it changes everything about how you cook and eat. When the segment ended, the living room was completely silent for several seconds. Then my mother started crying and pulled me into a fierce hug. Sarah was beaming, already pulling out her phone to share clips on social media. My nephew looked up from his trains and asked, "Uncle Marcus, are you famous now?" But it was my father's reaction that I'll never forget. He stood up slowly, walked over to where I was sitting, and extended his hand for a handshake. When I stood to take it, he pulled me into a hug instead, something he hadn't done since I was a child. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong. About everything." "Dad, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." He pulled back to look at me directly. I spent so many years trying to protect you from failure that I almost convinced you to give up before you could succeed. What you've built, what I just saw on that television. It's remarkable, Marcus. I'm proud of you. The rest of Thanksgiving Day was a blur of phone calls, emails, and social media notifications. The Good Morning America segment had generated hundreds of new orders, thousands of website visits, and dozens of interview requests from other media outlets. Jake was fielding calls from investors, and our customer service team was working overtime to handle the influx of inquiries. But in the quiet moments between the chaos, I kept thinking about my father's words from the year before. You'll never make it. He had been wrong. But in a strange way, I was grateful for those words. They had become the fuel for my determination, the voice I argued with during every late night and difficult decision. Sometimes the people who doubt us become our greatest motivators, not because they're right, but because they push us to prove just how wrong they can be. Epilogue, Chicago, November 2024. 5 years later, Farmtable Stories has become one of the leading meal kit delivery services in the Midwest, with over 50,000 active subscribers and partnerships with more than 200 local farms. We've been featured in countless publications, won multiple awards for innovation and sustainability, and completed a successful $15 million Series B funding round that valued the company at $75 million. But the moment that still means the most to me happened on a Thursday morning in November 2019, when my company logo appeared on national television, and my father finally understood that believing in your dreams isn't naive, it's necessary. Every Thanksgiving since then, we've made it a tradition to watch that Good Morning America segment as a family. My nephew, now 9, always asks to see Uncle Marcus on TV, and I'm happy to oblige, because that moment represents more than just business success. It represents the power of perseverance, the importance of staying true to your vision, and the beautiful possibility that sometimes, just sometimes, the people who tell you you'll never make it end up being your biggest champions in the end. If this story inspired you to pursue your own dreams despite the doubters, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, the next time someone tells you you'll never make it, you have two choices: prove them right or prove them wrong. The choice is always yours.